This is a riveting exploration of wrongful convictions and the lengths some will go to expose the truth. Each point in this summary invites listeners into the raw, real, and shocking world of those who lost years of their lives to a broken system. Join us as we unveil 7 striking points that reveal the haunting flaws in the justice system, and the relentless pursuit of justice for the innocent. 1. The Norfolk Four Nightmare. The Norfolk Four story begins with a tragic crime and a broken system that led 4 young men, each serving in the Navy, into a nightmare they could never have anticipated. It all started on July 8, 1997, when the body of Michelle Morbosco was found in her Norfolk, Virginia, apartment. Michelle had been brutally raped and murdered, and her husband, a sailor stationed at sea, returned to find a scene of horror. The police quickly targeted Michelle's neighbor, Danielle Williams, a quiet man whose life up until then had been orderly and unremarkable. Under immense pressure to solve such a shocking crime, authorities believed they had found their suspect. They thought Williams, in an apparent act of desperation or passion, had committed the crime. But the story was far from straightforward. Williams was pulled in for questioning and subjected to hours of interrogation by a detective named Glenn Ford, whose tactics would later be called into question. This was no ordinary questioning. Ford used tactics designed to exhaust and break Williams, and after hours of relentless accusations, insinuations, and threats, Williams, tired and mentally broken, confessed to the crime. Yet as shocking as this was, the worst was yet to come. Detectives soon concluded that Williams hadn't acted alone. They decided he must have had accomplices, despite there being no physical evidence to support this. With this new theory in mind, the police moved on to target other men who had known or been around Williams. Soon, 3 more sailors were drawn into this growing storm: Joe Dick, Eric Wilson, and Derek Tice. Like Williams, each of them would end up confessing to the crime under Ford's extreme interrogation methods. These confessions were the backbone of the case against them, even as forensic evidence, particularly DNA, told a different story. Months into the investigation, DNA tests came back with shocking results. The samples collected from the crime scene didn't match any of the 4 sailors. Instead, they pointed to a different man, Omar Ballard, a local criminal with a history of violence and, notably, a history of targeting women. The evidence was compelling, but rather than clear the sailors, the police tried to fit Ballard into their existing theory. They came up with an implausible scenario in which Ballard acted alongside the Norfolk Four. Ballard himself denied this, insisting that he had acted alone, yet the prosecution continued undeterred. Rather than correct their course, they doubled down on their case against the sailors, all while Ballard's DNA matched the crime scene evidence with statistical certainty. This was no simple error. It was a deep flaw in the system where stubbornness and pressure to close a high-profile case led to a web of lies and misjudgment. The Norfolk Four were given plea deals or, in some cases, life sentences without parole, even though none of the physical evidence connected them to the crime. The interrogations had been so intense, and the confessions so filled with contradictions, that it would take years to unravel. Over time, a wave of support grew around these men. Legal experts, innocence advocates, and investigative journalists brought new attention to the Norfolk Four, casting a harsh light on the police tactics and systemic failures that had derailed their lives. Gradually, evidence emerged showing that these were coerced confessions obtained under mental and emotional duress. As years passed and appeals mounted, the Norfolk Four's plight gained national attention. Eventually, evidence of their innocence grew undeniable. Experts in law and former FBI agents called for justice, and after nearly 2 decades, the sailors' convictions were overturned or pardoned. By then, the damage had been done. Each man had lost precious years, relationships, and peace of mind. Danielle Williams, for example, had been unable to attend his wife's funeral while in prison. Joe Dick struggled deeply with mental health challenges after being manipulated into confessing, and Tice and Wilson continued to carry emotional scars from the experience. The story of the Norfolk Four is a tale of misplaced justice, but it's also a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to give up hope. Through the determined efforts of attorneys, family, and advocates, these men regained their freedom and a chance to reclaim their lives. Yet, for each, freedom came with new challenges. Integrating back into a world that had once condemned them took incredible strength. The Norfolk Four's story serves as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, showing how even in the darkest of times, resilience and truth can prevail against overwhelming odds. 2. Confessions under pressure. In the intense world of police interrogations, the story of how confessions are sometimes forced out of innocent people takes a dark turn, revealing just how fragile the human psyche can be under stress. It's a chapter not about cold-blooded criminals but rather individuals caught in a whirlwind of fear, exhaustion, and confusion. Imagine a young man, maybe he's led a quiet life, kept out of trouble, and suddenly he's facing the most intense moment of his life, a police interrogation room where officers are convinced of his guilt. Under the unyielding pressure of relentless questioning, accusations, and threats, his reality blurs, and he begins to doubt himself. Take Eric Wilson, for example. He entered that interrogation room a man with a clean record, only to leave shattered and questioning his own memories. Wilson had served his country, grown up in a close-knit family, and had never faced trouble with the law. But as the hours stretched on, fatigue and isolation weighed on him. A seemingly innocent mention of a dream about the crime became a trap that sealed his fate. Wilson was grilled on details, coaxed into piecing together a scenario he had never lived. The officers pushed him, again and again, nudging him to remember details about a crime he didn't commit. Each time he stumbled, they filled in the gaps, until the story they crafted began to feel disturbingly real to him. And so, despite his innocence, Wilson walked away having confessed to a crime he never imagined. The process was meticulous. The officers began by placing doubts in Wilson's mind, cleverly guiding him through a series of what-ifs and then turning each hesitant response into an admission. He may have started with denials, clinging to his own knowledge of his innocence, but over time, the police broke him down. The repetitive questioning, accusations of lying, and insinuations that evidence proved his guilt wore him out. Finally, Wilson's defenses crumbled. He was told, with absolute certainty, that he had failed a polygraph, and even as he protested, the overwhelming authority in the room, the detectives with their hardened faces and unshakable confidence, seemed to hold all the power. In this emotionally charged setting, exhaustion took over. What the officers were playing on was a psychological truth: when people are isolated, sleep-deprived, and bombarded with accusations, even strong-willed individuals may start to believe in a different reality. It's easy to think that only the weak would give in to such pressure, but psychologists have shown that given the right conditions, anyone can be broken. And that's what happened here. The interrogation went on for hours, until Wilson's resistance turned into acquiescence, and acquiescence into a form of surrender. By the end, Wilson's mind was twisted into a narrative where he might have believed he was capable of the crime. The case shows how easy it is to confuse a coerced confession with a real one. Once the police extract the confession they need, they can move on, leaving the accused to face the consequences alone. For Wilson, the confession was a tragedy that would follow him, damaging relationships, impacting his view of the world, and haunting his sense of self. As he sat in that sterile room, with the detectives feeding him a story of violence, he was robbed of his peace and his truth. He left that interrogation room not as the man who walked in but as someone unsure of himself, devastated by a story the police had woven around him. Police tactics have long relied on the idea that a confession is the ultimate proof of guilt, yet cases like Wilson's expose a chilling reality. The techniques used to secure his confession, long hours of questioning, strategic misinformation, and psychological manipulation, reveal a justice system less interested in truth than in securing convictions. In the end, the confession became the primary evidence against him, even though, ironically, it was his very innocence that had made him vulnerable to these tactics. After all, he trusted that the police were on his side, that they were seeking justice, not pressuring him into a lie that would ruin his life. What makes these stories so powerful is the reminder that each one of us, under enough pressure, could falter. It's a sobering truth, one that shifts our understanding of what justice should look like. It's not just about catching the guilty, it's about ensuring that every step is fair, that no innocent person is coerced into bearing the guilt of a crime they never committed. In the case of Wilson and others like him, the line between truth and falsehood was shattered by the very people entrusted with protecting it. And in that brokenness, we see the true cost of confessions made under pressure, lives distorted by fear, memories shattered, and an innocent person left to pick up the pieces. 3. The role of DNA and new evidence. DNA testing is one of the most powerful tools for proving innocence, yet its path to acceptance in the justice system has been long and tangled. Picture this: years after a conviction, a small sample, barely visible, brings forth the truth. In cases like those of the wrongfully convicted, even the smallest biological trace becomes a thread that could unravel years of falsehood and wrongful imprisonment. But back in the day when DNA analysis was first emerging, it wasn't the first tool the courts reached for. In fact, the legal system was slow to embrace it. This slowness wasn't just procedural but often a deliberate resistance by those who'd already secured convictions and weren't eager to revisit old verdicts, even when new evidence was compelling. Let's consider the chilling case of Samuel Grasty, Derek Chappell, and Morton Johnson. Decades after their trials, forensic experts discovered 4 separate biological samples from the crime scene, including semen stains and saliva on a red straw found in a jacket pocket. All samples pointed not to Grasty, Chappell, or Johnson but to a single, unknown male, tagged as unknown male number 1. DNA conclusively ruled out the 3 men, yet this evidence was resisted by the very legal authorities who should have welcomed it. For Grasty, Chappell, and Johnson, this new evidence was more than exoneration, it was proof they had been placed behind bars for decades due to a gross miscarriage of justice. And still, their freedom didn't come easily. It took years of appeals and legal battles against officials who were set on preserving the conviction, not pursuing the truth. A compelling irony here is that, even when new testing methods advanced and evidence became impossible to deny, the courts remained, at times, impervious. At first, the DNA evidence was dismissed as cumulative, it was redundant, they claimed, as if to suggest that matching DNA profiles from every relevant piece of evidence couldn't shake the foundation of the convictions. This wasn't just procedural red tape, it was the justice system stubbornly fighting against the introduction of science that demanded the reopening of cases they had already considered closed. When DNA clearly showed that another individual committed the crime, prosecutors still resisted, questioning whether the DNA actually mattered in these cases and implying that they were correct to dismiss the men's pleas, even as evidence piled up suggesting a single perpetrator had committed the crime alone. For advocates and defense attorneys, DNA is a game changer, and every sample tells its own story. Even now, the rigorous standards required for new DNA evidence to be accepted in appeals are daunting, often requiring proof that could overturn the original outcome. The irony is painful, the very tool that could have exonerated the innocent often found itself blocked by the system it sought to reform. DNA testing gave Grasty, Chappell, and Johnson the proof they needed, but it took a relentless fight to get that evidence acknowledged. 4. Centurion's lifelong commitment to justice. When Centurion Ministries began, it was an unusual mission. Founded by Jim McCloskey, Centurion's purpose wasn't just to review files or write legal letters, it was to get into the trenches and fight for people who had been written off, thrown into cells, and forgotten. This journey was a relentless pursuit, one that meant going beyond the ordinary, spending years, sometimes decades, revisiting every single detail of a case, interviewing witnesses, and collecting mountains of evidence to prove a client's innocence. It was about peeling back the layers of judicial error, stubbornness, and often outright negligence that had buried these people in the first place. In the case of Carey, Centurion's dedication was tested as they spent years chasing down leads, retrials, and evidence that were supposed to speak for themselves. But the judicial system often met these truths with closed doors. Despite the court's rulings and the verdicts already in place, Centurion didn't give up. Each interview, each piece of evidence they uncovered added weight to the fact that someone who had suffered years in prison was actually innocent. Centurion wasn't just a legal team, it was a lifeline for people like Carrie who, after decades of fighting, had nearly given up. The Centurion approach is profound because it recognizes that justice isn't just about defending the innocent, it's about understanding the deep sense of loss that the wrongfully convicted feel. They know these aren't just legal battles but deeply personal missions for the people they help, whose lives, families, and futures were stolen. 5. The cost of a wrongful conviction. The price of a wrongful conviction isn't just measured in years lost. For those who've been falsely imprisoned, time does unimaginable damage. It fractures families, strips away identities, and forces people to survive in an unforgiving system where survival skills learned within prison walls often leave scars too deep to heal. Imagine someone convicted in their 20s, thrown into a cell with a new reality of distrust and fear. When they finally get out, their family has aged, technology has moved on, and old friends have moved forward without them. Many exonerees describe the feeling of being ghosts in their own lives. Released after decades, they struggle to feel alive in a world that went on without them. Kennedy Brewer is one of these individuals. Brewer was convicted on flawed forensic evidence, particularly dubious bite mark analysis that had no scientific foundation. For years, he endured the claustrophobic atmosphere of death row, where time barely moves, yet somehow decades slip by. Day after day, he thought about his daughter and the dreams he had for her, dreams that couldn't survive the prison walls. He missed watching her grow up, and by the time he was exonerated and released, the little girl he once knew had become a woman. No amount of compensation could bring back that lost time or repair the years stolen from their relationship. These exonerees experience a different kind of isolation upon release. For years, they've learned survival instincts rooted in suspicion, caution, and routine. Some struggle with simple tasks like taking public transportation or going grocery shopping, overwhelmed by choices and the subtle, constant fear of making a wrong move. They may feel embarrassed or anxious around new technologies, from ATMs to cell phones, and the rapid, relentless pace of modern life feels like a shock to their minds. For them, freedom brings both joy and a new sense of exile. For many, the trauma of wrongful imprisonment doesn't fade easily. Many exonerees develop post-traumatic stress disorder, with flashbacks triggered by everyday sounds like keys jingling or the sight of a police car. Each of these moments transports them back to the concrete halls and locked doors of prison, rekindling memories they desperately want to forget but can't. They bear these invisible wounds and try to rebuild, but the world they're re-entering doesn't always welcome them back with open arms. 6. Shocking judicial misconduct. Judicial misconduct can be like a poison in the legal system, invisible to those looking for justice and deadly to anyone trapped in its grasp. In the stories explored here, wrongful convictions are often traced back not to mere errors but to deliberate manipulation, where those sworn to uphold the law end up bending it to secure convictions at any cost. A young man in a courtroom might believe his innocence is enough, thinking that the truth will rise to the surface. But in many of these cases, that surface is carefully controlled, with vital evidence hidden, witnesses manipulated, and evidence crafted to mislead. Take the ordeal of Clarence Brandley, a man sentenced to death in Texas. His conviction wasn't just a result of one mistaken piece of evidence or a misunderstanding. Rather, the case was marred by consistent and intentional misconduct. During his trial, evidence that could have proven his innocence simply vanished or was kept from the defense. This wasn't just a case of negligence, it was a plan. Authorities went as far as to tamper with witness statements, rehearsing responses to ensure the trial's outcome stayed firmly against Brandley. This judicial betrayal impacted the lives of not just Brandley, but also his family and community, who had to watch as he was led to death row on charges he always denied. Even more disturbing is how some cases demonstrate an almost theatrical manipulation of the judicial process. In one instance, the district attorney and judge were seen planning the day's proceedings together in private. They huddled in an office, rehearsing how rulings would play out in court, as if the trial itself were a show and the defendant a mere actor in their production. Decisions, objections, and responses were coordinated to ensure the verdict they wanted, one that had little to do with truth. By working together, they built an illusion of justice while denying the defendant any real chance at a fair trial. It's almost unthinkable, and yet, for those involved, this was reality. In many wrongful conviction cases, even the most basic principles of fair trials were subverted by judicial misconduct. In the ordeal of a man wrongly convicted twice on bite mark evidence, a supposed expert took the stand with fabricated analysis. This supposed expert was later exposed in an elaborate sting operation, where it was revealed that his methods were unscientific and his confidence in his flawed results unnerving. Yet, the courts had accepted his testimony without question, sending an innocent man to prison twice, even bringing him close to execution. Here, too, those at the helm of justice were more interested in conviction numbers than accuracy, allowing unreliable forensic evidence to bolster a case they likely knew was weak. In instances like these, when a witness was asked to testify, promises and threats came into play. Deals were offered, such as leniency in other criminal charges or even financial bribes to ensure statements fell in line with the prosecution's goals. Such secret negotiations were often hidden from the defense, allowing unreliable testimonies to strengthen the prosecution's case and secure wrongful convictions. This misconduct reflects a tragic truth: justice isn't blind when those within the system cover her eyes. 7. The hard road to freedom and redemption. Imagine spending years locked away, knowing each second that you're innocent. Then one day, after endless appeals, dashed hopes, and fierce battles, you're set free. It sounds like a happy ending, but for many exonerees, freedom is the start of an entirely new struggle. Years lost to wrongful imprisonment mean not only missed milestones but a profound sense of dislocation and alienation. The journey out of the cell and back into the world demands incredible resilience, because freedom, as they discover, comes with unexpected burdens. For some, like Carrie Max Cook, freedom meant facing the ghosts of his past. Wrongly convicted and kept on death row, Cook endured unimaginable trauma. He fought against a system that had not only stripped him of his youth but stained his reputation, leaving deep scars. When he finally walked out of prison, he was free, yet also burdened by years of isolation, mistrust, and the harsh memories of prison life. Cook's release was full of moments that might seem mundane to others but were nearly overwhelming to him. He learned to navigate relationships, got a job, and found a way to speak about his experience publicly, inspiring countless others with his resilience and determination. Yet, even these successes were often shadowed by flashbacks, reminders of a life he hadn't chosen and couldn't fully escape. For many former inmates, the sense of freedom is muted by the knowledge of all that's been lost. They return to a world that has moved on without them. The technological, social, and personal changes can feel like landing in a foreign country. For those like Joe, who had been behind bars for decades, freedom brought unexpected isolation. Simple activities like going to the grocery store or making a phone call could be overwhelming, with anxieties bubbling up over choices they had never faced before. The support of family and loved ones helps, but there are gaps that even the deepest love cannot fill. The person they were before their imprisonment is gone, replaced by someone hardened by years of deprivation. Survivors of wrongful imprisonment often carry deep psychological wounds that don't heal simply because they are free. The anger and bitterness can be immense, and some, like David Alexander, who returned home with the weight of lost decades, described it as a surreal experience. Life outside felt both liberating and imprisoning in its own way. Alexander had been locked up for crimes he never committed, and his freedom only served to underline all that had been stolen from him. He spoke of moments where hope flickered, but then the realization of his losses would rush back, stealing away any sense of peace. Still, despite the many setbacks, he and others who fought for their freedom carry on, finding new purpose in sharing their stories, warning others about the flaws in the system, and working to make sure no one else suffers the same fate. The true journey of redemption for these men and women often extends beyond themselves. By sharing their experiences, they bring awareness to the need for reform, turning their pain into something powerful. Final words. The journey through these stories of wrongful conviction opens a window into the darkest corners of the justice system, where mistakes and injustices collide to create unimaginable suffering for those ensnared. The theme running through these narratives is one of perseverance in the face of impossible odds. Each story reveals not just the details of wrongful convictions, but also the staggering impact on individuals, families, and communities. From the Norfolk Four to cases of coerced confessions, we've seen how ordinary men are pushed to their limits in situations that would break the strongest among us. In the case of the Norfolk Four, four innocent sailors found themselves locked in a nightmare that forced them to confess to crimes they didn't commit, all because of relentless interrogation tactics. These tactics are not isolated events, they're tools used by a system under pressure to produce results, often at the expense of justice. We've also examined how DNA evidence, a groundbreaking advancement in the world of criminal justice, is sometimes the only thing standing between the wrongfully convicted and the rest of their lives spent behind bars. But while DNA can set the record straight, the road to admitting it into evidence can be fraught with resistance. This resistance often isn't because of doubts about the science itself, but because acknowledging new evidence can mean admitting to grievous mistakes, a hard pill to swallow for any institution or individual that sees itself as infallible. Then there's Centurion Ministries, an organization whose work stands as a testament to the power of one person's conviction in the pursuit of truth. Through relentless investigation and commitment, Centurion has become a lifeline for the innocent, especially in cases where no one else is willing to look further. Their work brings a human face to the criminal justice system, highlighting the need for empathy and determination to set right what has been so tragically wrong. The personal cost of these convictions extends far beyond prison walls, as we saw with the stories of men like Kennedy Brewer and Joe Bryan, who each lost decades of their lives to a system that turned its back on the evidence in favor of convenience. Their re-entry into society is marked by a series of struggles most of us take for granted. Everything from navigating modern technology to reconnecting with family becomes a monumental challenge after years in prison. The trauma doesn't fade upon release, it lingers, shadowing each step forward and affecting their sense of self and trust in others. Judicial misconduct is another ugly truth in this series of cases, showing how the desire to win a case can overshadow the duty to pursue justice. From tampered evidence to rehearsed witness testimonies, the lengths to which some authorities will go to secure convictions reveal a painful reality: the justice system can be just as capable of creating victims as it is of protecting them. For those whose lives are changed by this misconduct, the consequences are as irreversible as they are devastating. Once accused and convicted, the shadow of guilt can follow them for years, regardless of later exoneration. Finally, the road to freedom and redemption for these wrongfully convicted individuals is a testament to resilience. Facing freedom after years, or even decades, behind bars is both a relief and a struggle. Freedom isn't just a matter of walking out of a cell, it's about rebuilding a life, reconnecting with family, and finding peace with what was lost. The journey back into the world requires a courage equal to that which kept them going while inside. Many exonerated individuals find purpose in advocating for reform, ensuring that their suffering can lead to change. These cases remind us that the pursuit of justice is far from perfect, and that it requires constant vigilance, empathy, and, above all, accountability. For each person exonerated, there are systems and practices that need reform to prevent such tragedies from repeating. This book serves as a powerful reminder that real change comes not from sweeping reform alone, but from the courage of individuals who continue to fight, even when the odds are against them. Through their stories, we are reminded of the importance of a justice system that doesn't just convict, but also listens, learns, and seeks the truth above all else.